Welcome to the Health Angle Podcast with Dr. Mike Headlee and Dr. Gordon Fimreite, where we'll be exploring different angles of health to achieve the best version of yourself. Now, here's your hosts, Dr. Mike and Dr. Gordon.
Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Mike Headlee, and with me is Dr. Gordon Fimreite. Welcome, Gordy.
Hey, Mike, and welcome viewers to the Health Angles. Today's podcast is going to be all about fibromyalgia. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. You can also like our content as well as click the notification to get notification of what's coming up next. Today, we're going to talk all about fibromyalgia. So what does that mean? If you look at fibromyalgia, it tells you what it means if you look at the Latin root. Most medical terms have a Latin root to it. So if you look at the fibro, that means fibrous tissue. Myalgia, the my or the myo is the muscle. The algia is the condition of. So myalgia is the condition of the muscle. And it also can be termed as an illness, dysfunction, or some type of inflammatory response. In summary, fibromyalgia is characterized by chronic, widespread pain that is often debilitating, and it primarily affects women. There may be as many as 10 million Americans that have fibromyalgia, and it still remains a mystery as far as what causes it, and really misunderstood. And it is often also misdiagnosed. So we hope to unravel this condition, talk about what people can do, and is there a solution? And Dr. Mike, I know that you're writing a book on chronic pain, so this subject might be right down in your line of interest. So I'm looking forward to see what you have to say about fibromyalgia.
Inflammation and pain is, it affects everybody at one time or another, whether acute or chronic. And, the thing with fibromyalgia is I'm going to be talking about its link to brain inflammation. And I'm not a huge fan of labels. And we've talked a little bit about that before. And if you have discomfort in a limb and arm and leg and neck and back and whatever, things like that, that's fine. And I'm not saying fibromyalgia is not a real thing and a real pain complex. But in my 30 years as a chiropractor, Gordy, I hear a lot of people that say my fibromyalgia. And the reason I'm not a big fan of especially this label is because you said it earlier, the cause is a mystery oftentimes. And then treatment, there's no clear-cut treatment and or care and or things to balance the brain and the body, even though I'm going to talk about some natural remedies and some different strategies for our people. But gosh, it can be debilitating, and it can be just people want to give up, and they're just trying. They say they try everything. Well, make sure you listen to everything we have to say today to make sure your everything is the same as our everything. But yeah, a lot of people show up in chiropractic offices because they're tired of taking just really, really strong drugs with side effects and not having the problem go away. So with that said, I'll let you continue, but then I want to dive into some link to the extensive brain inflammation with fibromyalgia.
That's great. So, Mike, what I want to just talk about is what are the traditional symptoms of fibromyalgia? So what is it? What are the symptoms? Most people present with something, and here's what it is. We talked about it being profound and widespread and chronic. Traditionally, they've looked at 18 tender points for fibromyalgia, and it includes pain along the elbows and knees, as well as the collarbone and the hips. And if it's present on both sides, this is indicative of a fibromyalgia type of circumstance. And now the pain can also include not only the tenderness, but it also can include along the arms, the buttocks, chest, low back, neck, rib cage, shoulders, and thighs. So muscle, ligaments, and tendons, that also can be affected, not only the muscles, so it can be this kind of the soft tissue. And the intensity of the pain can vary. It can be intense one day, not so the next day. And it's been described as a deep muscular aching, stabbing. It also could be shooting and throbbing, also twitching. Fibromyalgia patients have an accompanied condition known as widespread pain perception processing. So what is that? This means that people with fibromyalgia may be more sensitive to pain than people without. So fibromyalgia can also be accompanied with depression and anxiety, sleep problems, which leave one battling with exhaustion, can be headaches, constant fatigue and tiredness, both mentally and physically. The fatigue is described as being draining and just relentless. And then there's cognitive issues like difficult thinking and concentrating, along with some memory issues. And cognitive issues are often dubbed as fibrofog or foggy headedness. So this affects concentration and memory. And then other symptoms of fibromyalgia may include pain on the face, along the face, or the jaw, such as temporal mandibular joint, TMJ, digestive problems, which include bloating, constipation, abdominal pain, or irritable bowel syndrome. Or they could also have like a tingling or a numbness within the hands or the feet. This Mercola article, they did these brain scans, and Dr. Mike, I think you're going to cover this in detail, but let me just do a little kind of a preview of what I'm assuming you're going to be talking about. They did brain scans of fibromyalgia patients, and they found hard evidence that the pain they experience is real. Fibromyalgia patients for tolerating pain is substantially lower than that of most individuals. And then recent research shows that fibromyalgia patients tend to have more severe inflammation in their body, including their nervous system and brain, which you're going to cover, and we'll talk more about this in a bit. And so it gets a little bit deep. And I know that we both had patients who have had fibromyalgia. And did we definitively say, yes, you have this label of fibromyalgia? Because they can come with obscure symptoms, and it could be nothing more than a musculoskeletal condition along with a bad diet or some other condition, although I personally don't like to label it either. And, we can talk about several factors which may contribute to fibromyalgia or the symptoms of fibromyalgia, but I'm going to pass it on to you because I'm curious what you have to say.
I've probably had the symptoms of it, once or twice or three times in my life. Fortunately, it was probably an acute, and I got over it or through it or around it. And I find patients come in with that label and they get really frustrated because they go, they labeled me fibromyalgia, so they quit looking for the cause, or they quit trying to come up, and they just want to give me drugs. And so I don't want to talk. I don't want to do that with people. I want to give people hope by talking about some different causes and some different solutions, and hopefully people can resolve some of their chronic issues with that. So here's a little summary of what I want to continue talking about. Great stuff, Gordy. Really, really good information. I'll just mimic a few of those and expand on some other things. So brain scans of fibromyalgia patients have offered hard evidence that the pain they experience is real. The threshold for tolerating pain impulses is substantially lower than that of most individuals. Not always, but it's super common. So recent research shows fibromyalgia patients tend to have severe inflammation in their body, including their nervous system and brain. So the cannabinoid receptors that produce the high in response to THC and marijuana also help regulate inflammatory reactions in the brain. And I would like to do a future podcast on CBD more than marijuana, but we'll talk about CBD in the future, I'm sure. The signals that instruct glial cells in the brain to stop their inflammatory activity is endocannabinoids, which work by binding the cannabinoid receptors on certain neurons. And our body makes endocannabinoids specifically with high intensity exercise or regular exercise, but then also during meditation and relaxation and all stuff that we've talked about in the past on getting out in nature and unplugging and relaxing and exercising. And then, so with age, your natural production of endocannabinoids decrease, which then leads to impaired immune response regulating and chronic inflammation. And so what I think is kind of, the cause remains a mystery. Well, I think chiropractors and you and I can find a lot of cause of nervous system interference, because that interferes with the brain in the body, its ability to heal. So, but the mechanism causing this, lowered pain threshold is also unknown as well. And my experience is kind of the opposite. I don't know. I'm real quick, pass it over to you. My experience, Gordy, is people with fibromyalgia are really, really tough. They might have symptoms in a lot of places, but the people I see with that label tend to be chronic, and they just put up with a lot of stuff and continue to work and just deal with it, but they want to find solutions. I don't know what your experience has been over the years, is if that pain threshold is lower with fibromyalgia patients. What's your experience with that, Gordy?
Well, I think they have so many symptoms. They have nothing but to perceive all the symptoms throughout the body that they have. And I think there is some degree of kind of just getting used to it, just kind of accepting it and just moving on, doing the best they can. But I also think it's worth mentioning there's other cofactors going on with these people that are experiencing, I'm going to call it the symptoms of fibromyalgia. And some of the cofactors that could be going on is you don't know what's going on with the anxiety in their life or depression. Could there be work deadlines or some family situation? I know fibromyalgia is diagnosed. They've had it for, 3-month period usually, and there's some other indicators. But depression, anxiety, that pretty much comes on after 3 months or more. Sleep problems, which can leave one battling with exhaustion. Oh, how much healing happens while we're sleeping? It's huge. We need our sleep. Headaches also can accompany. Constant fatigue and tiredness, both mentally and physically. Fatigue by a lot of these patients are described as just draining and relentless. And then there's cognitive issues like concentrating and thinking and memory issues. And I just talked about the fibro fog. Other symptoms, we talked about TMJ, digestive and the numbing and stuff like that. So these are big things. And the cause, they just don't know. I mean, they could look at injuries and trauma and overuse and tension and certain drugs. I mean, this all can have factor, but the CDC shows that patients with fibromyalgia or the symptoms of fibromyalgia are twice as likely to be hospitalized than patients without the condition. So that's pretty big. And then how do they really diagnose this? Diagnosing fibromyalgia is complicated. Most people don't know what it is. They'll misdiagnose it with something else before they finally settle in and say, I give up. Fibromyalgia. Basically, that's my synopsis of what happens based on some of the patients that have been diagnosed with this. But what will they look at? They'll do a cycle of tests and then they'll give up and then et cetera, until they finally get that clarity. But the American College of Rheumatology has set specific criteria: widespread pain lasting more than 3 months and the absence of another underlying condition. They use a PET imaging. Researchers at the Massachusetts General Hospital Institute in Sweden revealed this widespread brain inflammation that you were talking about, Mike. So that's really exciting stuff. And I think there's going to be more and more. I think that will come to the forefront. And I'm looking forward to seeing more research in that area. But the conditions that are misdiagnosed, what are they? They're mistaking it for something else. Hypothyroidism, that's one. Rheumatoid arthritis, that's another. Lupus, yet another.
There's just, well, I just wanted to touch on one other thing real quick, if that's
Sure.
okay, Gordy. There's a expert in fibromyalgia, Dr. Frederick Wolf. He's the director of National Data Bank for Rheumatoid Diseases and the lead author in the 1990 paper that first defined fibromyalgia's diagnostic guidelines, believing fibromyalgia is mainly a physical response to mental and emotional stress. And so stress and emotions may indeed play an important role. More recent research shows fibromyalgia patients tend to have severe inflammation of their body, including the nervous system and brain. And so there aren't really any laboratory tests available for diagnosing fibromyalgia. That's, again, why I'm not a big fan of the label. So what doctors, in my experience, working with medical doctors and physicians, they use patient histories, reported symptoms, physical exam findings, classic symptoms of this condition. You mentioned pain and cognitive impairment, fatigue, sleep disturbances, and it really disrupts stage 4 sleep. And so when you want to torture someone, you want to create inflammation fastest, don't let somebody sleep. Conventional treatment truly is pain medications. And now with the opioid epidemic and all the strong medications, that's the scary part of it, is the stronger and addictive medications that are out there, and they think they're just like over-the-counter stuff, and they aren't. Psychotropic drugs, antidepressants, and that's not in my scope, but if someone's not truly depressed and they're in pain, why are they getting antidepressants? But inflammation of the brain truly is a lifestyle factor that can be really heavily influenced by lifestyle factors. And I want to talk about just a little bit some really the best ways to improve your inflammation based on your lifestyle. So your diet can either promote or decrease inflammation. And that's one question when you're going to eat something or buy something out of a vending machine or at a gas station when you're filling up your car. Is this going to improve my brain health or make my brain worse? Is this going to make my brain better, or is this going to make my brain worse? Is this going to decrease inflammation, or is this going to increase inflammation? You got to ask yourself those questions. So here are some really top inflammatory things that you really have to address. Is sugar, especially high fructose corn syrup and processed corn syrup, synthetically produced trans fats. That was one of our highest watched podcasts and listened to podcasts, is when we talked about the bad fats. Processed vegetable and seed oils, high in oxidized omega-6 fats, processed meats, refined carbohydrates. And so what's the opposite? Omega-3 fats we've talked about. We're both big fans of that. And then just crucial for brain health and helping brain inflammation. Antioxidant-rich fruits and vegetables, Gordy. Obviously, that's nothing new to our listeners and our viewers. Optimizing your vitamin D3 levels, 60 to 80 nanograms per milliliter is ideal. Ideally, it's nice to get through the sun exposure and outdoor. Researchers believe that optimum vitamin D levels may enhance important chemicals in your brain and protect brain cells by increasing the effectiveness of glial cells that help nurture damaged neurons back to health. And then another really nasty thing for brain inflammation is just chemicals. What are chemicals into our environment? Non-stick pans, fire retardants from clothes, deodorants, topicals that we put on our face, our body, our skin, we ingest, we breathe in. So really be chemical aware when you're purchasing things, natural fragrances, things in sheets and clothing. High quality sleep is another component of fibromyalgia. So, those are just a few simple things. Addressing emotional contributors. I have my best emotional contributor relief strategy for fibromyalgia, Gordy, is something called emotional freedom technique. If you can go to YouTube and just type in emotional freedom technique for fibromyalgia, in under 5 minutes, you'll almost feel like an expert, because it's that simple, even though there's nuances and you need to be hydrated. And we don't have the time on this podcast, but emotional freedom technique for fibromyalgia. Look it up. It has a direct link to physical pain. And this is a neurobioenergetic normalization technique. And I'm a big fan of EFT. So that's a really, really good strategy. And I have several other ones, but I'm going to let you take your turn on natural care.
That's great, Mike. Great stuff. Really powerful information. And just getting right back to the diet. I mean, anything you could do to go on an anti-inflammatory diet, that would be key. Avoiding baked goods and flours and sugar foods, and just really eliminate those inflammatory types of foods. So chiropractic, that improves a patient's range of motion, the joints. You get great mechanics. You just really concentrate on the human structure, which also influences the nervous system. That can be huge. How many patients, Dr. Mike, have you and I had that said they might have had fibromyalgia, but indeed it was really based on the structure, and they were just having some symptoms that we take care of every day?
Yes.
Yeah, really, that's the bottom line. And how many studies are out there with depression and chiropractic, or exercise and depression, getting the body and the joints moving through chiropractic, getting an exercise program going? They say that the more movement you have, that can counter the results of depression that happens in a lot of these fibromyalgia patients. And then we talked about the brain and the nervous system. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the medical or the therapeutic marijuana, just for a second. So we're talking marijuana. The THC in marijuana is the cannabinoid receptor that produces the high. Well, this also helps to regulate the inflammatory reactions in your brain and nervous system. So recreational-wise, I'm not a fan of this marijuana, and you can go online and find out why, a lot of stuff. But when it comes down to cancers or people that are really having real difficult times and they need this medical therapeutic, there's a space for it. Physical therapy that can improve strength and reduce pain as well. There's cognitive behavioral therapy for managing emotions, etc. Alternative therapies such as yoga, acupuncture, and then, hey, if you just can't get to that anti-inflammatory diet, nutritional consultation. There's a lot of nutritionists out there that know their stuff and they can guide you in the right way. We talked about the inflammatory, anti-inflammatory diet, stress management, calming yourself down. We have a podcast out there on reducing stress, and that includes meditation as well as breathing exercises and calming the body down, the body and the mind. So I would encourage our viewers to go back to our stress management and look at some of the invaluable advice that we give there. And we talked about moderate exercise. Harvard researchers, after exercising for 20 weeks, women with this condition reported improved muscle strength and endurance and lessening their symptoms, including reducing pain, stiffness, fatigue, and depression. So good. Exercise may include swimming, walking as well, and anything to put less stress on the body and structure. And then Dr. Mike, neurostructural integration technique. NST, you can look that up, go on YouTube. They have gentle massage-like techniques that people can look up. There's also stretching that people can do. And then I talked about acupuncture already. Western studies have shown that the use of acupuncture on pain relief points cut the blood flow to the key areas of your brain within seconds and may support the activity of your body's natural pain-killing chemicals. There's also ultrasound, muscle stim, just to name a few. And then I recommend journaling, finding out what your routine is and finding what might be contributing, whether it's your diet, your lack of exercise, getting caught up in a stressful situation, just jotting down things that might be causing unpredictability in your routine. Jotting it down, you might see something that shows up that you're not even aware of. There's also, we talked about yoga and meditation, just get that inner peace. And then just time for rest. Ensure that there's moments for relaxation amongst the chaos world that we're in right now. So, Mike, back to you.
Great information, and thanks for sharing a really, really great list that people can check off. It's like people say, I've tried a lot of people, and I trust that they've tried a lot of things, but really listen to this and see if you've tried absolutely everything. So I'm biased. I start with chiropractic first and then exercise and movement. And I'm a big fan going off exercise. Tai Chi and Qigong, these traditional Eastern practices have been shown to relieve fibromyalgia symptoms. And I call Tai Chi and Qigong yoga light. If yoga is a little bit too intense, even from beginning yoga and things like that, start off simple and easy. And you don't have to go to the swimming pool and just swim laps for a half hour. You can walk in the water and do water aerobics and just start really slow and easy. And my favorite supplement, Gordy, for this type of issue is magnesium. Especially before bed, can promote restorative sleep, relax pain muscles, and heighten the effects of endorphins as well. One of my favorite things to do when I go visit my daughter in Fargo is to do a float tank. I don't know if you've ever tried a float tank, Gordy, but float therapy study found that flotation therapy can temporarily reduce pain, muscle tension, stress, anxiety, and sadness while increasing relaxation, feelings of well-being, energy, and quality of sleep. And the tank that I go into is a private bathtub type thing. It has 800 to 900 pounds of Epsom salts, and it's kind of like floating in the ocean, but you couldn't sink if you tried. And you can have it with complete darkness. You can have it with mild light on. You can have it with no noise, or you can have some light, relaxing music. I'm a huge fan of float tank therapy. Cardiovascular exercise increases endorphins and helps fight pain and stress. Music therapy too. Music daily for 4 consecutive weeks can significantly reduce pain and decrease depression in fibromyalgia patients. So music therapy, essential oils. I'm not an expert, but I know a lot of people trust and use these essential oils. If you know a really good practitioner to use essential oils to diffuse or use on your body, lavender is one, pretty popular one to use at night to help sleep. So those are just some additional things that people can try out, along with the emotional freedom technique. I love the journaling idea, the meditation, relaxation things too. And start off simple. I use this almost every podcast, Gordy, but it's your line. Consistency is more important than intensity. Just get started. Just start journaling, even if it's 2 minutes, even if it's 3 minutes. Do 2 yoga stretches. You meditate for 5 or 10 minutes. Go for a walk outside in a park while it's still nice this fall. So keep it simple, but just get started.
Good information, Mike. I want to just say some final points, and that is the bottom line is to adopt a healthy lifestyle. You can go back to some of our podcasts, and some of our podcasts cover everything from vitamins and supplements to electromagnetic fields and how you can really protect yourself from those computer and the technology and all the waves passing through us. We have podcasts on relaxation techniques, positive psychology. I would encourage you to go back, check out our podcast, subscribe, hit the notification button. Really, the bottom line with fibromyalgia is adopt an incredible, healthy lifestyle. It'll make a huge difference because there's so many different areas that people can just really pinpoint of where they might be weak and just work on those weaknesses. And you might see your body and your mind and your soul just really increase, and you become a different person after a few months. But just like we talk about, consistency is more important than intensity. Get the information, start applying it slowly, not too fast. Slowly, just adopt it very slowly. Make it a lifestyle. A lot of times people jump into this 110%. They're so motivated, and then they quit. So the bottom line is make this a lifestyle. And the only way you can do that is just slowly adopt things into your own lifestyle. Pick the area that you feel, this is an area that I really feel weak. I think I need some work on this. So that's my final point, Mike.
Thanks. Very, very great information. And that's life-changing and life-saving and really, really practical knowledge. And yeah, I agree. Get back and look at some of our old videos and podcasts. And we have quite a few shows now, and just apply that to your life. And so I end our podcast with, what's your number one takeaway that you can share with your best friend? What's the number one thing you both can have a topic discussion on and share? Do you journal? Do you meditate? What do you do for muscle aches and pains? Have you ever heard of fibromyalgia? Do you know anybody with fibromyalgia? What's your number one takeaway that you can have a nice discussion with and help your best friend out, and they can help you out by having a really deep conversation about this? And then what's your number one action step that you can start today? Like Gordy said, just start slow and simple and easy. If you want to do yoga, don't do it for 3 hours tonight and can't get out of bed tomorrow. Do it for 3 minutes maybe. So what's your number one action step that you can take today? Are you going to pick out some piece of paper and start journaling? What are you going to do? And with that, Gordy, what are we going to talk about next week?
Next week, Dr. Mike, we're going to talk about natural anti-aging strategies. Basically, how can we stay young? So that's going to be fun to dive into that subject. So I just want to say thank you to the viewers. Please subscribe. Please hit that notification button. We appreciate it. And until next week, we'll see you on the Health Angle podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the Health Angle podcast. Please subscribe to our channel and catch us for our next episode.